Alyssa, thank you for being here, for being one of the speakers at our conference. Thank you for saying yes to be one of the speakers, and thank you for your time.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
First, I will say a few words about you. You are the founder of Seed and Sue. You are an expert in emotional development. You have master's degree in early childhood education. You dedicated your whole career to advancing the field of emotional intelligence. You co created and researched the collaborative emotion processing method. You are reaching out to people through your podcast, Voices of Your Village. And you published your first book, Tiny Humans, Big Emotions. And Seed and Sue serves as an international community. It provides tools and expertise through your speaking engagements, through online courses, through professional development for educators, probably also for parents. And you are aiming at building emotional intelligence in children, but also in adults. What did I forget? What can I add?
Oh no, it's so funny to sit and like hear about myself. It's always an interesting experience. You're right. I have a master's degree in early ed. I did co-create the collaborative emotion processing method. We researched it, and it's what our work's really based on. And what I found as a teacher first was that there was a huge focus on social development of how do we help kids be kind and empathetic and engage with each other. And that's what we get to talk a lot about today. It's like, how do we support those social dynamics? But what was often left off the table was the emotional part of social emotional development. How do we help them build awareness of their own bodies and how their unique nervous system works and what it looks like for them to access regulation, that it's not one size fits all. And then as we were looking at this, my colleague Lauren and I, we realized that was left off the table, the emotional part of social emotional learning, and also the us part that like we would be sitting in a workshop and I'm like, this sounds great. I love this. I'm on board. And then I would get back into the classroom and a 2-year-old would hit somebody else or throw something. And I would find myself triggered and angry at a 2-year-old. And then I was like, how do I put this into practice? And I feel like that just kind of multiplied when I had kids. I have 2 children now, and they are very different humans. And as we were developing the SET method, we have 5 components, and one of them is adult-child interactions. The other 4 are about us. It's our understanding of the nervous system. It's us building awareness of what's happening for us internally, our self-awareness, or implicit biases. Do we have times where we feel like kids are old enough to know better about something, or we have certain expectations of them in public versus at home, or how they're supposed to respond to something based off of our own social programming, our childhood experiences, all that jazz. And we dive into self care, looking at what does it really look like to take care of your nervous system, and that what it looks like for you is probably going to be different than what it looks like for me or for my partner, for my kid, and really helping people understand the scientific knowledge behind all of it.
Mhm. Perfect. Thank you. We are
Yeah.
today supposed to talk about siblings
Yeah.
and how the siblings conflict is actually a normal part of growing up, but how understanding the underlying factors can actually help us create more harmony at home. So I would like in this session if we could explore how each child's sensory profile influences their interactions with their siblings, with their friends, with us, and how, for example, sensory mismatches can contribute to the tension.
Mm.
And when I'm talking about sensory profile of the child, I wanted to ask you if you can explain to our audience what this actually is. What are we talking about?
Yeah, I love this question because it is the foundation for doing the rest of this. We have 9 sensory systems. We have the ones we often hear about: sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, those 5 senses. There are 4 more that we don't often talk a lot about. We have interoception. That is where you like notice if I say I have butterflies in my stomach, that means like I'm nervous or I'm excited. Those like internal cues. It could be that you're hungry, you're tired, you're cold, you have to go to the bathroom. Those internal cues that let us know how we're feeling. Interoception is really key for uh, being able to access regulation because when we are able to notice, oh, my heart's beating fast, then we can start to see things like bubbling up before they explode. And you can't regulate what you're not aware of. So, interoception's really, really key here when we're going to be asking, say, siblings to use their words and connect with each other, be kind with each other, etc. All those social pieces we want, they have to first know what does it feel like when I'm experiencing dysregulation so that I can learn how to regulate that and use those other skills. So interoception is really important. We have our vestibular system. This is responsible for it's your movement sense, like your balance. It keeps you upright. You can access your vestibular system by moving the plane of your head. So, like spinning, dipping upside down, going on swings. And for all of us, we are either going to be more vestibular sensitive or more vestibular seeking. So, it's either going to drain us or it can regulate or calm us. And so, for instance, for my two children, my daughter is vestibular sensitive. The other day, we have a pod swing like in our house. She was in the pod swing, and after a little bit, she sat up, and we were like, "Oh, she's ready to come out," and she just threw up. And we're like, "Oh, she's vestibular sensitive." Yep, that was her threshold. My son could live in the pod swing. It is so regulating and calming for him. Then we have our proprioceptive sense. This is responsible for letting our body know where our body ends and something else begins. So my son has really high proprioceptive awareness. For him, if he comes into a space and somebody starts to get close, his proprioceptive awareness goes off. It's like beep, 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 you're getting too close. Exactly. And for my daughter, she has lower proprioceptive awareness. So we have a phrase in English here that just says, you're like a bull in a china shop. And this is like her, where she can just like plow through things because she has a hard time noticing, like, where does my body end and that other thing begin. So she bumps into things more frequently. She will go to sit next to somebody and she sits on them. And so for her, a lot of our work is around her proprioceptive sense. And then we have neuroception. Neuroception, I think of our neuroceptive sensitive humans as like, they have like good spidey senses. You know, when you like walk into the room, if you're a person where you walk into the room and you can really feel the energy in the room, and you're like, ooh, there is tension here. This is uncomfortable. My nervous system is now heightened from this and really responding to it. Those are our neuroceptive sensitive humans. They can be categorized sometimes as emotionally sensitive or highly sensitive people, where they are really attuned to the energy in the space. And for all of us, we have neuroception. It keeps us alive. It helps us notice, like, oh, if you're in a space, you know, that feeling like, I feel like there are eyes on me, like somebody's looking at me. This happened to me at the grocery store the other day where I was like in line at checkout. And all of a sudden I had that feeling of like, somebody looking at me, and I like turned and found there was somebody who knew me from Seed and So from Instagram that I didn't know. And she was like, "Hi, are you Seed and So?" And I was like, "Yeah, my name's Alyssa, but yes, hi." And we like chatted, but I could like feel her eyes on me. That's neuroception at work. It's really scanning your environment to let you know, like, am I safe? And for some folks, that neuroception is they're more sensitive to it, where they are in like a heightened state of scanning the environment. Our spidey sense folks, they're our energy readers. And so when we're looking at a sensory profile, what we're looking at are these 9 senses and seeing what is calming or regulating for you and what's dysregulating for you, what drains you. For instance, for my son, he would fall into the sensory sensitive category where he has a lot of sensitivities. He is tactily sensitive, so like touch. He doesn't want you to like put your hand on him. If he's having a hard time, offering him a hug is going to make him fly off the handle, skyrocket. He clothes are often too tight, too itchy, too something. And he is sound sensitive. He'll say, Mama, what's that noise? And I don't even hear the sound yet. I have to like really tune in. And I'm like, oh, that's a lawnmower 2 houses down or whatever. And he's visually sensitive. He likes things in order. And so for him, he'll say, like, I'm lining up he started lining things up when he was like 1, where you'd come in and we would be like, oh, Sage has been here. It would be like a line of his tools or a line of the trucks, and they're all intentionally in a certain place. And if you move them, he notices. He's a visually sensitive. He is a details person, right? Like he's smell sensitive. He'll like start to gag with smells. He's taste sensitive. This leads to picky eating, where like the taste, the smell, and the tactile like touch combo of eating is really hard for him. Um, and then he's regulated by that vestibular input. I told you he could live on a swing. And he's regulated by decrease in stimuli. So if you're a human who's like, you know what I really want is to be in a dark room where I'm laying by myself and nobody's talking to me, nobody's touching me, nobody needs anything from me. That is like his dream. He wants to like hide. He calls it being a turtle. He wants to go inside of his shell and have nobody talk to him or touch him and just like decrease that stimuli. Um, his sensory profile is much different than my daughter's. My daughter is not sensory sensitive. She like loves music. She walks into a room of 100 people and she's like, let's party. He walks into a room of 100 people and he finds a place to hide. And so for her sensory profile, she has lower proprioceptive awareness. She's proprioceptive seeking. So she's my climber. She climbs all over everything. She's always jumping from one thing to the next. She would climb back inside my womb if she could. Like there's not enough touch or proprioceptive input. And I relate to this. I'm very similar. Where like for me, proprioception is really helpful in that like I love to wear her and she loves that. So we are a sensory match that I can wear her on my body and she is cozy and snug to me. That fills my cup, that fills her cup. When my son was a baby, he would be like in a carrier or in a wrap and he would have his hands out. Like, I don't want to touch, like, I understand I'm a baby and I need to be transported from one place to the other, but can we do it with the least amount of touch? And that is what we're looking at when we're looking at sensory profiles. What's key here is that when we understand our unique sensory profile of what drains us and what recharges us, then we can help kids access regulation throughout the day, both proactively and then reactively in the moment when they get dysregulated, so that they can access things like self-control, so they can choose words to say to people around them, so they can choose their body language, their tone, their actions, etc. They only have access to that when they're regulated. And that requires this understanding of how does my unique body work?
Mhm. Yep. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation.
Totally.
So now, when we know what the child's sensory profile might be, or we understand at least the term, how can this help us as parents address the siblings' challenges?
Yeah, it's huge. And I just thought too, we have a free resource. If you just heard that and you're like, okay, where do I start? If you go to seedquiz.com, we have a free quiz we put together with an occupational therapist that can help you understand your kid's sensory profile. It's also undergoing an overhaul that if you do it right now, awesome, you will get results that will be helpful. In a few months, it's going to go even more in depth. And anyone who's already done it will send you an email to say, like, hop back in and check out the new quiz, and it'll give you even more in-depth information. It's being built out now. But what we can use with this when it comes to siblings, I use my 2 kids, for instance. Mila is 1 and Sage is 3.5. He's almost 4. And when they have conflict, when she comes into his space and he's working on something, what she's looking for is closeness in proximity. She wants to be right up next to you. What he's looking for is space. And so when I understand that about their systems, I can figure out, how do I meet both of their needs here? I can also teach them both about their needs. We talk a lot about this in our household of, I'll say things like, hey, Seiji, you know how you love going on the swings and it feels so good for your body? And when mama goes on the swings, it makes my belly feel sick. You know how you love to have some space when you're playing? Did you know that Mila loves when she's close to somebody and she can like touch them? Do you know what she might like? You know that stuffed animal you have, that dog that's weighted and it's a little bit heavy? She might like it if that was sitting next to her and she could snuggle up next to it. So maybe if she comes close to you, you could say, "Oh, Mila, you can snuggle the dog. My body needs space." And so we help him understand, which is then she's being privy to all this conversation too, helping her understand we all have different nervous systems and different bodies that need different things, and we can meet our needs together and in community and still access our own play and connect in the ways that feel good for us as individuals.
You already talked about some of the sensory mismatches between siblings. Do you want to give me a little bit, maybe more examples how these
Totally.
impact their interactions, during the day, or maybe even when the kids are older?
Lucia, I have 7 million examples because it's my lived experience every day. Yes, when we're looking at this too, we're looking at things like how do I help create what we consider like a safe space, a regulating space for each of my kids so that they know what's available to them for regulation. There are two things that are really helpful here. One is to look at proactively. So throughout the day, before we're at a place where everyone's dysregulated, I kind of think of this like food. Like if you imagine if kids woke up in the morning and we're like, we're not going to feed them until they're hangry, that would be nuts, right? Like, no, we feed them throughout the day so that we don't get to the point of them being hangry. When we think of the sensory systems as a whole like that, that's what we're looking at when we say proactive. I'm thinking like, how throughout the day are their sensory needs being met? And it is individualized here, right? So for my daughter, I know that for her sensory needs, she's going to need some like heavy work and big body play at intervals throughout the day. So she will like push things. She is right now very into, because she's one, pushing. We have like a wagon, and I'll just put some toys and things in the wagon. So it's a little heavier for her. And she's pushing it around our house right now. And if we think of kids like carrying things, we look at like household tasks. When we're bringing groceries in from the store, I will hand her a bag that she'll like pull over to the fridge or to the kitchen to help us unload things. For my son, what we're looking at here is both vestibular input and downtime. So for him, I have some things that like spin where he can spin around. My husband has an office chair that he can spin in. There's tools like a sit and spin or swings or things like that too, if you wanted additional tools, but you can get it from like flipping upside down. We'll do things like handstands or headstands where we play a game where he's flipping his feet up onto the couch and his hands are down and his head's down. We'll do yoga where he's doing down dog, and we do different poses where I'm going to move the plane of his head and get some of that vestibular input in, where he's going to dip upside down. And the cool thing about doing like yoga poses is I can customize this where I can be like, okay, Seiji, show us your best down dog. And then I can turn to Mila and have her do a pose where she's going to get more input from proprioception and not be moving the plane of her head as much since she's sensitive to that. And so we're looking proactively throughout the day. For him, downtime, we will carve out time where he has like in his room some of his favorite toys that are like chokables for her. And it's like toys that he is not ready to share right now. That is his space. And he loves like art. He has an art card in there that just has a bunch of materials and he can kind of do with them what he will. There's scissors and glue and pom-poms and paper and crayons and whatever. And we will say like, all right, buddy, in 10 minutes, it's going to be time for everyone to take a little break and you can go have 10 minutes up in your room. You can do whatever you'd like up there. His art cart's up there. He has time then where nobody's in his space. Nobody's talking to him. We're not using it in a way of like, you're in trouble, go to your room. You did something wrong, go to your room. We present it as like, hi, everybody's going to have a break for their body. You can head up to your room and play where nobody's going to be in your space and you can have some quiet time. And now that that's just like a part of our rhythm and a part of our family culture, he knows like he's not in trouble for it. He didn't do something wrong for it. We really present it and talk about it as like, this is what your is helpful for your body. And I'll tell him like what I'm gonna do. Here's what's helpful for my body during my break. He knows I'll usually do like a video, like a workout video. I love proprioceptive input. So for me, like lifting weight and doing the workout video for 10 minutes even is just recharging for me. And then we'll come back together. So we're looking at those like proactive ways throughout the day and then reactively. So in the moment when inevitably there's going to be dysregulation, we are going to all be existing in the same space. Mila's going to scream. That's going to be too loud for him. She's going to get excited and crawl over to him and want to touch him. And he is not going to be jazzed about that, right? Like those things are still going to happen. And so when she screams and then he turns and he screams back at her, then what I do is I get to think about how I can regulate the temperature of the space, right? So you can be a thermostat or a thermometer. A thermometer reads the room and joins it, where I might be then yelling too. A thermostat sets the temperature, where I go, oh, wow, our voices just got so big. And I'm using a whisper voice and I'm bringing that energy down, especially for our sensory sensitive kids. They're often neuroceptive sensitive. And so when I can regulate that energy, it goes a long way for them. I'm going, oh, wow, our voices just got so big. Mila was excited to see you and she screamed. And then I heard you scream right back at her. That was an overwhelming sound. Whew. I'm going to validate in a quiet, calm voice. And at the same time that I'm doing this, I'm walking over towards Mila and I'm picking her up and I'm going to give her the touch, the connection that she's looking for in that moment and pull her a little bit away from him, which gives him the space that his nervous system needs in that moment. And then I will turn to him and say, do you want me to take some space with Beans? We call her Beaners, Beans. Want me to take some space with Beans and check back in with you in just a minute? And he'll be like, yeah, take her away. And so then I'll pull her into another space. I will feed into her and give her some connections. That's what she was looking for. His nervous system gets the minute that it needs to have a break. And then I will come back and check in with him and say, hey, bud, how you doing in here? Is there anything I can do to be helpful? And we have visual cards at our house. We have one for him and one for her that have visuals of like ways to regulate. So I will like show him a visual, like, do you want to go in your swing? Even though he's almost 4 and has full verbal language and can tell me these things, in the moment, your brain can't access all of the language that it has. And so if I can give him a visual cue, it's one less thing that his brain has to do in that moment. So I just present him like, would you like to hop in your swing and I can give you some pushes, or do you want to go to your art cart? And then once he's calm, then we can talk about it. And I can be like, oh man, whoa, Mila came in so excited to see you when you got home from school, and her scream was so loud it looked like it overwhelmed you. Let's figure out some things that we can do for when she's still learning what to do when she's excited. And then we can brainstorm together. He can't do that brainstorming in the moment. It has to happen when he's calm and regulated outside of the moment. And too often we try to have those conversations too early or right away, and they're not ready and they'll yell at us. They'll say, like, no, or they'll be screaming or not able to navigate that conversation yet.
You were also saying that you have a quiz at your
Mhm.
website, and we will put a link to your profile and to the description of this talk. But I also wanted to ask you if there is a way how the parents can actually understand and identify their child's sensory needs and adjust their approach to better support their children.
Totally. Yeah. So, first, actually, I would start with yourself and go look at those 9 systems that we went over and think about what is it that drains you? Are you a human who, if you walk into a space and there's like clutter and piles of things, it feels really overwhelming for your brain? And you're like, I need those to be cleaned up. Then you might be visually sensitive. If you're a human who comes into a space and the noise can feel so overwhelming, you might be sound sensitive. For sound sensitive people, If you are not in control of the sound, it's usually dysregulating. If you are in control of the sound, it can be regulating. So you might be a sound sensitive human who, when you're in the car by yourself, you can put music up as loud as you want, or you can make as much noise as you want. We see this in kids too, where we're like, they're saying everything else is too loud, but then they're screaming so loud, or they're playing an instrument so loud because they're in control of the sound. So it's not dysregulating for them. But to start with yourself, go through those systems and think about what drains you and what recharges you. When we start with ourselves first, it's then easier to start to look outside of ourselves. Also, it'll give you the blueprint to map out and say, okay, throughout the day, if I know I'm sound sensitive and I am regulated by touch and proprioceptive input, what's my self care plan for the day? I know that in the morning when there's hustle bustle and we're trying to get out the door and go to school, there's a lot of sounds and there's a lot of things happening. And that's really dysregulating for me. My mother in law got Sage for his second birthday, this little toy train that can turn on and it makes noise. And it like goes and inevitably in 4 seconds gets stuck on like a wall. And it's like click, 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 click. And I want to chuck it out a window. Like it drives me absolutely bonkers, that sound. And so I realized, like, for myself, I gotta put that train toy away in the morning. It is not accessible to play with in the morning because I'm not the parent I wanna be when that train is around. And when we're trying to get out the door and there's already increased sound and noise, like, that is a boundary I have set for myself to be the regulated parent I wanna be. And then looking throughout the day, what is your proactive self-care plan? What do you have access to for touch or proprioceptive input if that's regulating for you? What do you have access to for a sensory break if you're a sensory sensitive human and that's what you need? Can you step outside and just breathe fresh air for a minute or look up at the sky for 30 seconds? Those are things that we're going to look at proactively fitting in throughout our day first. When you start with yourself, it gets so much easier to look outside of yourself and start to recognize some of these things. So then you're going to turn to your kids. First of all, use our quiz because it'll do this work for you. But you can also step back and just observe without interacting, without diving in, just notice. When your child goes to play, do they climb things all the time? Are they jumping all over things? Do they like really seek a lot of that big movement and big body play? They're probably proprioceptive seeking. Or are they a human who like they can go and sit and like read a book in a corner for a long time without movement? They might be more sensitive than seeking. So you might notice that they actually get overwhelmed by stimuli, and finding a spot where they can have calm is what their nervous system craves. So just starting to pull back and just notice, just observe your kids and see, what do you notice about them? What do they gravitate toward, or what happens where that sends them like flying off the handle?
What are some practical ways that parents can help siblings develop empathy for each other, understand their needs?
Yeah, I think often what we'll end up doing is accidentally kind of pitting siblings against each other. And if we can shift this to really speak openly, like, oh, wow, Sage is still learning. The phrase is still learning is one we use all the time. Sage is still learning what it feels like in his body when he's overwhelmed. We're going to help him figure that out. And then I'll say, like, oh, Mila's still learning what it feels like for her when she's getting hungry. We're going to help her figure that out. And I will say it about myself. Like, we come in from outside and I'm feeling overwhelmed with getting lunch ready and all that jazz. And I'm stressed, then I might turn and say like, "Oh my gosh, I'm still learning what it feels like when I'm overwhelmed and how to calm my body when I'm overwhelmed. Here are some things I'm going to practice." And really just talking openly about this breeds so much more empathy and compassion because it helps kids see beyond the behavior. It helps us see beyond the behavior. It helps them see that, like, Mila isn't coming into your space to take your toy because she doesn't like you, because she's trying to be rude. She's coming into your space and taking your toy because she's trying to connect with you, and she's still learning how to say, "Can I play too?" Or "I feel left out. I want to be included." And we get to help her with that, buddy. We can say, "Oh, Mila, I'm using that one. If you want to play with me, you can have this one." and offer her something else and another yes way to be included. I will say to my 3-year-old quite a bit, we'll say, "Oh, I'm hearing a lot of what she can't do. Can you think of something she can do?" And we've talked about this outside the moment that if I come in and I say, Sage, you can't climb on that, or you can't jump up there, or you can't have that. And I just tell you what you can't do. If you're still learning what you can do, it doesn't help teach you. And so we can think about what can we do? What can she do? What can you do? And that's language that we use every single day in my household to really help kids look beyond the behavior and help understand the need that's driving the behavior, which breeds empathy and compassion.
Also with the adults.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, you already talked about some proactive strategies, but are there some proactive strategies the whole family can use to reduce the siblings' tension over time?
Yeah, I think the thing that we found most helpful in working with families with this is really that open communication about the nervous system and that everyone has different needs. And really what we see here is that then I was just working with a family recently who has a 7 and 9-year-old, and we've been working with them for years. They've been a part of our village for years. And she just reached out and was like, "Oh my gosh, this just happened that reminded me of when they were little, where the 7-year-old was having a hard time and the 9-year-old was the 7-year-old was having a hard time and, like, interrupting the 9-year-old's space and play and coming right in there, and it was after school, and the kids were kind of fried anyway, and, the 9-year-old turned and said, "My body needs calm right now, and I wanna help you, but I have to help me first," and went to their space and calmed their body, and then went back to the 7-year-old and was like, "Okay, now you can tell me what happened." And it was so rad to hear, like, this is what this looks like down the road, is that when we're practicing this, where we're just normalizing that all of our bodies need different things, and in the same way that if one sibling needed glasses, not everyone would get glasses just to have the same thing. We talk about how our bodies are different and we all have different needs. And when we understand our body's needs, then when we're having a hard time, we know how to support ourselves to move through that and to be with hard emotions without being consumed by them. That is truly like a foundation that I wish every family could have.
Alyssa, is there anything else that you would like to add to finish this interview with maybe something that we didn't mention and you want to mention it, or something that we forgot to say or that I
Sure.
forgot to ask about?
Sure, sure. The most important thing I think about all of this is that there's no perfection. The goal isn't that you're going to do all these things and everyone's going to be regulated all the time. Unless you have a hormonal imbalance, no one is regulated all the time. Everyone cycles in and out of regulation and dysregulation. What we're looking at here is how are we helping kids learn how to move through experiences and feelings so that they don't get stuck in them, right? So we're not seeing like a spiral into anxiety when they're feeling scared about something, that they learn, well, it's okay for me to feel scared. And here's what I do when I'm feeling scared that helps me move through it, but not in the effort of solving it or making it go away. I have never once left the day as a parent or a teacher and been like, wow, I was perfect today. I nailed everything perfectly 100% of the time. It's not the goal. In fact, it's really helpful for kids to see us make mistakes, to get dysregulated, to watch us move through it or not, and to get stuck in it and then come back and repair with them. There's this narrative, especially on social media, that like, you'll get to this place where you can recognize it when it's building, and then you'll take your space and you'll calm your body and you'll come back to them. And there is not a single person on the planet that is doing that all the time. There just isn't. And so you don't have to either. Like, give yourself grace. You're going to lose your cool sometimes. Sometimes you're going to be mad at a 3-year-old. And like, I know that sounds ridiculous to say out loud that you're like mad at a 3-year-old, but it's going to happen. And that's okay. They do a lot of things that in the moment are inconvenient and annoying. They're not like hey, mom, do you have a spare 20 minutes for me to have a meltdown in this grocery aisle? Like, no, it's going to come up and it's going to be annoying. You're going to feel feelings of embarrassment and things like that. And just to know that you don't have to be perfect. You get to come back to them and be like, whew, I was feeling overwhelmed with that. Sadness is a feeling that I'm still learning how to be with and how to be comfortable with. And sometimes when you're feeling sad, it's hard for me to not make it go away for you. I'm going to keep working on that. I love you, buddy. And it's okay for you to feel sad, right? Like we get to come back to the table and repair with them and reconnect with them. If your goal is perfection, you're going to feel like you're failing every day.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And we have so much more in Tiny Humans, Big Emotions, my first book, with a second book for the kindergarten to fifth grade range, Big Kids, Bigger Feelings, coming out this fall.
I will put links to the podcast. I will put links to the book. I will put links to your website. Is there
And the
something?
quiz, just the quiz. Yeah.
Yeah. And is there something else that you would like to invite the audience to see, hear, listen, read?
No, I'm sure you're consuming so much. Just like take a beat to know that you're doing a great job.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for accepting the invitation. Thank you for being with me here. Thank you for the interview.